In American society, money is a taboo topic. We're taught at a young age it's improper to talk about it, but we're also bombarded with messages about the power and importance of money in our everyday lives. And by not talking about it, we miss out on the skills and lessons we need to effectively understand and financially plan. That changes today. Welcome to Money Tales. Hosted by Sandy Brager and Cami Doder, Money Tales brings more than 35 years of combined professional experience in personal finance to demystify money and demonstrate what it's like to speak openly about personal financial matters. Join us each episode as they interview modern-day movers and shakers about how money decisions intertwine with their daily lives in order to give you better insight into productive financial conversations. Subscribe today and register for our blog Fathom at aspiriant.com/podcasts to increase your money mojo. And now, here's Cami and Sandy.
What happens when the rockstar lifestyle starts to feel more like a death sentence than a dream? For John Anderson, our guest this week on Money Tales, the parties, the wealth, and the wine cellar full of excuses were all just masks for something much darker. He had it all, or so it seemed, until two tragic losses and one haunting realization stopped him in his tracks. If I don't change, I'm next. This is a conversation about money, privilege, and the moment you realize that real wealth isn't what's in your bank account, it's in the life you choose to live. Let me tell you more about John. He's an entrepreneur, author, speaker, and founder of Replace Retirement, LLC. Since age 40, John's purpose has been to inspire and challenge leaders to achieve their greatest personal potential. Today, John challenges you to articulate the realization of your life's journey. Do it for your children, grandchildren, and great-grandchildren to preserve how you created a life of contribution and meaning while overcoming fears and self-doubt to find your unique purpose. And do it for the betterment of mankind.
Here are 3 key money topics John hits on in this conversation. First, he discovered early in life that wooing wealthy women required the same effort as courting those without means, so he strategically married into money. Second, the importance of money mentors. And third, regardless of your wealth, we all have to find some way of creating value in the world. Now it's our pleasure to bring you John Anderson's Money Tales.
Welcome to the Money Tales podcast. I'm Cami Doder.
And I'm Sandy Brager.
I've had some money conversations I thought would be fun to talk about here. Both daughters are in their school's variety show. They've signed up to do a little act, a little performance, a little something. My eldest daughter comes home with her friends that they're going to do the show and they're going to practice together. But of course, they're immediately focused on what their outfits are going to be.
Oh, yes, that's an important part.
Yes, so important. We're going to be on stage for 2 minutes. So I had to manage how much we're investing in an outfit. So they go find a t-shirt online, t-shirt and a little skirt. But what this ties to money is, I said to Morgan, my daughter, as much as I'm happy to pay for these, the other families need to pay. And really, the kids need to pay. I think that's really important. And actually, that was part of the story. The kids showed up with cash that day. So they're prepared to pay, but it didn't quite cover what the costs that they chose. And so it was really fun because this ended up being a money conversation I had with my daughter. Hey, let's be thoughtful about our money, but we also need to maybe feel uncomfortable and ask our friends if they still owe you some money, me some money. And then it was really fun. It translated to conversations with the parents because the parents are like, oh, I'll take care of it. This has been great. To then say to the moms, it mostly was the moms I was dealing with, would it be okay if your daughter pays me? And the moms got it right away. They were like, oh, what a great idea. And each family's figuring out their ways of talking about money and the values, figures out their own way. And each mom asked, well, why? And I said, gosh, I think it's really great if kids actually handle the money versus mom paying me in Venmo. And it's been really fun, not just with my conversations with Morgan, but also with the moms and learning how they're handling it. One mom was talking about the chores they do, and she would take it out of the allowance. And I said, oh, you could, or do you want her to pay me? Because then it's her handing over her money. I really appreciated the chance to talk about money with my daughter's friends' moms.
That's so cool, Cami. Good for you. That sounds like a really great community cash conversation.
Community cash conversation it was. On that note, it's my pleasure to welcome our guest today, John Anderson. We're looking forward to having a conversation today with you on Money Tales.
Wonderful.
Would you briefly introduce yourself and share a couple pivotal moments taking place in your life that really impacted who you are?
I'm an entrepreneur and have been for most of my adult career. Perhaps that's maybe one of the pivotal moments. Growing up, I was in an upper middle class home, and my father was president of a worldwide corporation, which he had worked his way up from an engineer into sales and then sales into sales management. And finally, he's the president of the company. But it was an affluent area, and there were definitely people wealthier than our family. And my father, being a hard worker and self made, he said, "You better figure out what you're going to do in life because you're going to have to do it all your life." And I'm like, "Oh." And then I'm not going to help you. I'm not going to take care of you, kind of thing. Now, he did pay for our college. So that was a great head start. There was no concept of an inheritance or anything like that. That sat with me, and I saw how the neighbors were living, and some of them were living quite well. I was dating a girl, and we went on her father's 57-foot Chris Craft yacht because I'm in the Great Lakes. And I'm like, this is really cool. I could totally get into this. I think that's where the seed was set. It's easy to say in retrospect, but I think I started dating with that strategy. It'd be just as easy to marry a wealthy girl as a poor one.
Oh, Sandy.
That's a message I heard all of my life.
So I ended up working at a bank as a messenger. So I've always been a hard worker. My father gave me that characteristic. I got hired in the 1980s when we had one of our downturns. It might have been the gas crisis or whatever. There were 135 applicants for this one position. And I showed up. I've always been in a sales role, and I just kind of sold myself, and he hired me on the spot. I'm like, you don't need to talk to anybody else and so on. So now I'm working at this bank, and I noticed that this woman's last name is the same as the president of the bank, but that didn't sort of bother me. I'm like totally comfortable with that because my father's president. I didn't realize later that they actually owned the bank, among other things. So we started dating, and to her credit, she hid stuff from me all the time we were dating. So we were dating, then we lived together for a while. And one day I saw her Visa statement, and it was like $1,200. Now, this is the 1980s. And I'm like, holy moly, $1,200. Do you need help paying this off? And she said, no, I've been saving my money. I should be okay. I mean, she completely guarded this.
She's just hiding her wealth from you.
So finally, like after a year of serious dating, I go to her parents' house, and okay, this is a house, and we have people waiting on us. This is a whole new tier that I've never experienced before. And so I'm like, okay, I think I found a winner, and the courtship picked up. To her mother's credit, she made us date for 5 years before she would accept my proposal. So we had to be really serious about what we were doing. But certainly money was one of the drivers. So that was a significant step in my life.
John, are you still married to the same person?
I am not, but we are extremely close, and we can talk about that later. I put relationships before money, and we have a great relationship. We're getting together in a month and heading out on our private jet to Aspen. That's how close we are. And yet I'm remarried. And it says a lot about her, too. It's both ways. But anyway, one other big thing in this whole picture, I grew up, again, in this upper middle class home, and across the street, there were two instances that I couldn't quite figure out. One is I hung around with a kid who was not very wealthy, and I really liked him. I forget his name now, but I remember my mother had some sort of issue with him, and I don't know why, and I don't know the backstory on that. But the other thing is we used to sort of pick on the Jewish family, kitty corner to us. If you're going to do anything prank, you did it to them. Don't know why. It's just we were picking on them. Again, there was nothing said at the dinner table or whatever, but there must have been some sort of underlying current. So one day I'm working at this mortgage company, and I'm the messenger and mailroom clerk, and you're supposed to use a company car. And there were no company cars except the chairman of the board. I walk into his office and I said, Mr. Cooper, I need to do a run, and your car is the only one in the lot. And he throws me the keys. I did not expect this. I'm this cocky young guy. And so I get back and he said, oh, don't talk to me, John. Well, Mr. Cooper was Jewish, and he ended up befriending me. And he was an amazing mentor in my life, just life-changing. And one day, this is over a lot of time, probably a year, he says, John, I wish I were you. And I'm like, Mr. Cooper, what are you talking about? I got this big L over my head. I'm the frickin' mailroom clerk and you're chairman of the board. This is crazy talk. And he said, no, you're going to do great things one day. And I get emotional saying that to this day. That changed the entire trajectory of my life so that all of a sudden, here's somebody I respect and admire. And he's not my parent. He's not my teacher. There's no motive for him to pump up smoke. But I believed what he said and it sunk in. Years later, I'm married to this wealthy Jewish girl. I'm at the country club that Mr. Cooper's at. And I said, Mr. Cooper, I wouldn't be here today if it wasn't for you. And he said, no, John, you wouldn't be here today if it wasn't for you.
Oh my gosh, he's amazing.
Isn't he? And so that's a lot of what ultimately led to my writing the book, Replace Retirement, is we have the ability to change the trajectory of people's lives. And it's that mentoring role, and it's probably older man to a younger man, an older woman to a younger woman, all that dynamics. But I wouldn't be who I am today if it wasn't for these various people stepping into my life and changing my perspective. Otherwise, there would be no relationship with my ex-wife. The whole story would be different. And he's the one that taught me, no, everybody's worth considering.
What a beautiful story and such an important message. I love the idea of changing the trajectory of lives for the good. It sounds like money played an important part of your upbringing.
Again, my father's successful and we live a comfortable life. And so that's making an impact on me. And again, a real hard work ethic. He would get home, have dinner with us, and then go up to his office and work. He clearly was like a workaholic and really enjoyed it. My mother never said this overtly, although I did learn this. Her family lost their business in the Depression. They were in Canada, so it was a small town, and they owned like the general store, and it got wiped out. So she went from being comfortable and living probably a better than the neighbors kind of thing to being desolate. And so I think she transferred her money fears or anxiety onto me.
You felt that.
I think so, because that's why it became such a fixture that I've got to get financial security by pursuing this target of I'll marry well, I'll have that security. And I think I was doing it more as a emotion from her. It wasn't really mine. So ultimately what happened in my marriage after being age 30 and at the country club, and literally we have private jets. And Neiman Marcus would open an hour early so I could go in and lay clothes out and stuff. And then I walk out, I don't have to sign anything or anything. So it was this really crazy life. And I once landed in Chicago. They had this thing called Meigs Field. It was a little island off Chicago. It's no longer an airfield. I think it ended with 9/11. But it used to be where all the private planes would fly in. So I fly in on my private jet to meet somebody. And the cab driver said, "Are you a rock star?" And I said, "No, but I live the life of one." All that being said, what I thought was security, what I thought was the top of the pyramid, ring the bell stuff, wasn't providing any meaningful value in my life. I could have cool experiences and nice stuff, but it wasn't serving who I was. And so now at 67, I understand that I was letting my head make decisions based on our whole economic system and everything else, but I wasn't listening to my heart. So when I listened to my heart or my soul, it was saying, no, you need to go on a different journey. There's nothing wrong with what you're doing. There's a whole journey in store if you'll just step away. And I actually had kind of a moment like that. I did a vision quest in the Colorado Rockies. So 3 days, 11,500 feet, a tent, a journal, and water, no food. It was guided by somebody. So he checked on me to make sure the animals hadn't eaten me or anything. In that quiet, reflective time, I had that insight or conversation with God, if you want. You're only on fire when you're racing down a trail at breakneck speeds and you don't know what's around the next corner and so on. Don't you want a life like that? This is great. You found this paved road, straight line, very smart. There's nothing wrong with it, but you are your best when you're racing down a trail and you don't know what's around the next corner. And that's true. I snowmobiled 3,000 miles in Quebec in the month of February. I'm all about racing around on something at crazy speeds. I had to step away from the security of all that money and so on, take the road less traveled. And that's with my ex-wife, our relationship is still strong because one, she said, "Well, thank you for not taking my money." I said, "It wasn't about your money." It's like, "Why are we getting divorced? We have fun together. We live a great life." And I'm like, as a 20-year-old, Peter Pan, that's awesome. But I don't want to be Peter Pan anymore. I want to go on this journey and I can't do it with all this trapping.
How old were you when you went up to the top of the mountain?
It was kind of like a 40s midlife crisis kind of thing.
Okay, so you had decades of marriage by then?
Oh, yeah, yeah. She actually thought at first that maybe he just needs to go through this. He'll get this out of his system.
As you look back on the earlier part of that relationship, do you think you knew in your heart that it wasn't what you really needed? Or were you so tied up in the narrative of financial comfort that you really were detached from your heart?
Well, and I want to give credit to her family also. The whole family is humble. They're successful today. And my children are the fourth generation. So successful family, very charitable, but do not want their name on anything. I saw the humility that they modeled, and she models it to this day. My daughter drives a Volkswagen GTI with 150,000 miles on it. She's got millions of dollars. It's like, car's still working. Why get rid of it? I kind of like it. I don't want new car. That was modeled by her parents and then by her. And it's not that they don't live a nice lifestyle, but relative to their means. When my daughter was graduating from college, I took the private jet with my current wife down to the graduation or the ceremony, and my ex flew up on a commercial flight. So I'm using the private jet. And then she was going to Europe after that. She said, "Do you mind dropping me off at JFK? Do you mind dropping me off at JFK?" No, no problem. She's paying for it. I'm not paying for it. That's the humility in that family.
Amazing. I'd love to understand the conversations that you and your now ex-wife were having around money. She's humble. You really are enjoying this lifestyle. Were you having conversations about your combined wealth?
Yes, it's the old thing. It's who you are speaks so loudly about you. I can't hear what you're saying. So it's more behavioral than words. That was the first part. And I don't know if it was done right or wrong or whatever. When she turned, I don't know if it was 18 or 21, whatever it was, she got a big chunk of money by all of our standards. And that was really hers to do whatever she wanted. She could burn through it, or she could invest it, or whatever. She was very judicious with that. And so it's not that we didn't do nice things and so on, but there was always this concern about both being a good steward of that. And she would often challenge me if I was being extravagant. I want a fancy car. And she'd say, "Well, I'm not sure you should do that." And she'd often say, talk to my dad and just make sure. And it was funny because when I had the conversation with him, I wanted to get a Corvette. I'm a car guy. He said, "I don't care what car you drive." He said, "I belong to several country clubs. Talk about silliness. Why do that? But I love golf. You're a car guy. You love cars. Get whatever car you want. But don't ever do something to show off. It's okay to pursue your passions, but it's not about looking the part." So there were those conversations. The other thing he taught me was the compound idea of money. So when I married, I had been working for IBM. So I had a good job. I worked for IBM, which at the time was the most profitable company in the world. So I think my mother-in-law is like, okay, this guy, he's a success and so on, because every mother wants their daughter to marry a good man. And I think she was concerned, could I afford the lifestyle? And my father-in-law basically said, "Don't worry, they're going to live a nice lifestyle," kind of thing. I don't know. I had $10,000 saved at IBM or $8,000, whatever it was, a little stock thing and 401k. And I'm like, what do I do with that? Should I just spend it? And, clearly we've got all this money. He said, "Put it all in National Bank of Detroit." So I put it in NBD, and it grows and it doubles and it splits and so on, and dividends and so on. That $7,000 or whatever, I don't know, it was less than 20 years, is now like 128,000, because ultimately then it got by for Chicago, and then Chase Bank bought it and so on. So when I cashed it all in, my little 7,000 is like 128,000. I'm like, okay, this is pretty cool. All my investing and so on today is a result of that lesson of take that principle and put it to work and live below your means and all these types of things. So some of it through conversation and some through behavior. He did help me out with my first business. I would call him all the time because I really liked him. Like, we were best friends. I called him one day and he said, "John, you don't need to call me on every decision. If you don't make these decisions, you'll never know whether I did it or you did it. And so I'm glad you're excited. I'm glad about your enthusiasm. You're going to do just fine on your own. And this was even better. If you ever get in real trouble, you call me up. I'll help you out."
Man, you had great mentors and partners.
Yeah, yeah.
John, I want to fast forward to the part where you decided to leave your marriage. How old were your children at the time?
They were high school.
you're moving on with your life. You realize you like taking risks. Relationships are really important and that you've been blinded by dollar signs. What happens from then on? Because presumably your lifestyle takes a very different route.
It does. One of the things I like, and maybe again, this is part of my father's influence, there's no safety net now. So I need to really work my program and be disciplined, or I'm screwed and I'll shot myself in the head kind of thing. So I really like that structure. And one of the conversations I had with my ex, she had a place in the vineyard down Palm Beach. I said, you seem to be able to live a life that most people can't and not implode. I don't think I could do that. And I said, unfortunately, I think our kids are a little bit more like me. And she said, what do you mean? I think they need the structure. And so, again, this is why our relationship's so close today, is they see we're very fond of each other. Our kids see that. But I needed the structure and the discipline and so on in order to keep my life together. And I think she's an unusual person that doesn't self-destruct with all that time and money and privilege on her hands. So you hear a lot of horror stories. So one of the conversations I do have with my children, I always say, either I'm the stupidest man on earth, or there's something to the reason why I went on this path I went on. And you guys have to decide where you're going to use as your mentors and so on. I needed that structure. Kids didn't have to work growing up, which I thought was a mistake. If I'd had more control, I would have said, no, they need to have a job. Because I was like cutting the lawn or something. Like, what are you doing? I'm cutting the lawn. She's like, no, you get a lawn service. Really? Okay. Go play golf. Stop the cutting the lawn. Along the way, my daughter goes to a private school in Asheville, North Carolina called Warren Wilson, a private college. And at Warren Wilson, everybody has to have a job on campus. So some people cook, some people clean, some people take care of the equipment, but everybody works. So we're out for a hike. I found with my daughter, it's always better if we're hiking through the woods and not looking at each other.
That's when the better conversations happen. Yeah.
Yeah, right. And so she's trotting along. She said, Dad, I got to tell you this really silly thing. I hope you don't laugh at me. What's that? I really like my job as a janitor. And I said, no, that's not unusual at all. I said, it's like swimming. You can read about swimming. You can watch people swim. You can go to the pool where people are swimming. You can get in the pool and hang on to the edge of it. But until you carry your own weight through the pool, you don't know anything about swimming. I said, that's what work provides. It gives you this ability to carry your own weight through the water. And that's why your father does what he does. And I think it's an indispensable thing. You can't inherit it. You can't read about it. You have to just do it. So to this day, my daughter is typically working. She does fun stuff. She sailed a boat from New Zealand to the Fiji Islands and back, like 100 foot. And then she got her captain's license. And she did a thing last summer where people pay you to take their sailboats from like the Greek islands back to the south of France. They pay everything and you're in their really beautiful boat. And all you need to do is sail it there. She's found fun ways to earn money. And then sometimes she works at a coffee shop because it's social. So it's not for the money. It's for all the benefits that work provides you and the identity and meaning and so on.
I'm still wrapping my head around this need for structure. And it sounds like the safety net of money was holding you back from something you needed for your own self that caused you too many choices. Could you help me understand it?
Well, we talked about Peter Pan. I was living a rock star life. I was drinking too much. I was doing drugs. I wasn't who I was intended to be. And I could see that. And I just didn't know how to stop it other than to put everything on the line. And that's essentially what I did. If I was drinking too much, well, we had a wine cellar downstairs, so I should have a bottle open in the wines. So I had all these workarounds and it just got old. This is going to kill me. And I had two people near me who had tragic deaths. One had a drunk driving accident, the other one overdosed. And they were within about 6 months of each other. And I'm like, if I'm not careful, this is going to be me. And so this is the legacy I'll leave my children. Then my dad was a fun guy. He just partied too much one night and kind of went over the deep end. That was not the lesson I was going to leave them. So again, maybe it's back to upbringing. I got to make a contribution. It's important, all the swimming, all the things I said. And I feel like this lifestyle just doesn't afford that. It affords just the opposite. With enough money, you can buy your way out of anything. That's the privilege of wealth. You can get anything expunged with money.
John, I'm curious, as you chose to pivot your life and focus on relationships over money. Do you find that money is part of your relationships at all today? And if so, how?
It's certainly a component. I help people create like a plan for their life. That's the same thing I did for myself. I've played around with different ideas. So it's sort of like an affirmation, but I call it beliefs. So I create all these belief statements. I believe, blah, 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 blah. I believe this. And one of them is I believe I'm a capable steward of wealth, trust, and abundance, or something to that effect. Again, my father had modeled this good stewardship, taking care of the family and the home and money. He bought a car with cash and he was quite frugal. And here was the big surprise when he passed away, he had like $3 million, all self generated. And he left us some money, which I never expected. That was also imparted on me, both by him and my father in law, that I want to be a good steward. And so I'm financially comfortable. But of course, I wrote a book about not retiring. I don't think that ever goes away. Because at 30, I had reached the retirement idea. I can do what I want, when I want, with who I want, wherever I want, all this sort of dream stuff. Well, that's kind of retirement. So you work all your life and you earn enough money that you have the freedom to do what you want. Your kids are theoretically grown up and on their own and doing their thing. You don't have these responsibilities. So now you get a clean sheet of paper. That's the American dream. Then why would you just retire? Are you used up, or do you have no value left? So as a 30-year-old, I got to sort of get that glimpse that this isn't healthy. I need to create value. And so that's where that entrepreneurial piece was really helpful. And then that's led to today. So the work I do today is with family-owned businesses who have wealth. One of the things that's interesting is usually I lived a much wealthier life than they did. So I kind of know what they're going through. I kind of know their challenges. And I really encourage that. Well, so how do you both live a life that gives you value all the way through? And then how do you model that for your children? Because there's all this crap that can come along with money unintended. My kids had the same thing. They had a nice starting point. In my daughter's case, she's multiplied it 4 times, and my son's burned through 3/4 of it. 2 different paths totally. But I think that's the challenge. We all have to have some way of creating value in the world, whatever it is, including getting a boat from the Greek islands back to the south of France. Fair enough. But we all need that.
A sense of purpose. And it sounds like your daughter has found her sense of purpose. You have found your sense of purpose.
At least she's working on it. My purpose is to inspire and challenge leaders to achieve their greatest personal potential. And I help all my clients come up with a purpose statement. I make them say it every week. And I ask them, how are you going to live it this week? So your podcast is how I'm living it this week. So every week I have that intentionality. So these are all tools to help me create that structure and discipline and so on. And now I help other people do it. But to your point, my daughter's heard this hundreds of times. If she's read the book, it is that purpose thing, but she has to define it. You can't teach your kids anything. From 0 to 3, they're watching you like 100%. And then 3 to 7, maybe you're 80% effective. And then 7 to 12, maybe it's down to 65%. And then, of course, 13, everything flips. They have to watch me for like 2.5 decades before like, okay, maybe he's serious about this. Because they grew up with the other guy that was partying and crazy and so on. Is he really serious? Is this for real? A fun story. My daughter, she came to visit me. I have a place in northern Michigan. It's a beautiful cottage on a lake. It's awesome. I do vision boards. It came right off the vision board. So she came to visit me and she was sleeping in late. And at the time she was living in Montana. So she drove across from Montana. It's finally Sunday and I got to go, right? I got to work on Monday and stuff. And so I text her, I'll see you. Blah, blah. She comes out of her room. What the hell are you doing? I'm like, well, you've been in your rooms. I said, yeah, it's freaking 1 o'clock. I got to go and all this stuff. And so we start this little sparring you do with the kids. I blurt out, I don't have a trust. And you know what her comeback was? She's like, well, you sell some of this shit around here. You got motorcycles and jet skis and stuff. You got all these toys.
You got assets.
You can get rid of some of them.
No sympathy from her.
Well, isn't that beautiful? I love that. High five. Okay, you got me. You're absolutely right. Touche.
Touche. You're sharing that wealth is fantastic and also it's hard. It can have its challenges. I just am curious, how would you describe money? Money is what to you?
Money is a vehicle to have experiences with. And that's probably its best use. Have you read that Die with Zero?
No.
I have not.
Oh, there's a great book called Die with Zero. And there's 2 big takeaways. One is he uses that term, experiences. The whole reason you're working hard and creating wealth and everything is so that you can have a cool experience that you remember. So not only for later in life, but even now. You talk about these great experiences we had. Remember the time we went on this trip, blah, blah, blah. Okay. The other part of it that's really relevant, certainly for me, is that he says you got your go-go years, your slow-go years, and your no-go years. So let's say I intend to live well past 100. Originally, I used to say 103, and then I work all those clients, and I moved to 111. But emotionally, I'm more attached to 103. I still haven't got my head fully around 111. So we'll use that. So let's say from 93 to 103 are going to be my no-go years, where I'm just not interested. You mean I've done that. So then let's say 83 to 93 are the slow-go years. And one of my neighbors who I really like, Bob, I would say he's in a slow-go year. So he's still doing stuff around the house. He takes care of the garden and so on. They go to Florida in winter. He's still active. Right now, I'm in my go-go years. And so their point is with money, don't save it. If you want to give it to your kids, give it to them. It doesn't do them much good at 60. It does them a lot of good at like 38. So I'm even doing some things right now with my stepchildren. My children, of course, are set, but my stepchildren and how to help them now rather than later in life. And the other thing is, what are you waiting for? So Molly's my wife. I'm like, you got these two places, Iceland and Ireland. Let's go to one of them. What are we waiting for? We have the wherewithal.
Tell us, what's your next money conversation going to be, and who's it going to be with?
I'd really like to have more conversations with both my stepchildren. My stepson has been a little bit more interactive with me, but my daughter, they just had their first baby. They live in Kalamazoo, and Kalamazoo has this really cool thing. There's financial benefactors there. We're not quite sure who's doing it. They did a thing called the Kalamazoo Promise. If you went through Kalamazoo schools, from grade school through high school, you could go to any university in Michigan that you could get into, and they would pay your tuition. There's another thing they're doing. They don't say who they are. If you have a baby, there's something for getting pregnant, $1,000 or something. If I understood it correctly, when your child's born and you live in Kalamazoo, I think they give you $500 a month for the first year. I wanted to sit down with them and say, if you're comfortable, give me the $500 every month and let me play with that and put that away for your children and see where it can go. Now, I put something away for them. That's what I want to have that conversation. Let's use this whole idea of compound interest and investing and so on that I learned as a young man. Just like my father-in-law said, here's what you do, put it here. And boy, that was a great suggestion.
You're teaching about compounding and investing. Good for you, John. Thank you so much for joining us on Money Tales. Before we let you go, where's the best place for listeners to find you?
At this point would be replaceretirement.com. And then you can see the website and so on. And I have a book. And if anybody wants to reach out, it's just John at replaceretirement.com. And I'm happy to discuss money and life and marriage and everything else that goes between it.
Be a mentor. I love it. John, thank you so much. It's been an absolute pleasure.
Thank you. This has been a pleasure for me also.
Thanks for listening to the Money Tales podcast. If you've enjoyed this episode, share it with someone you think would benefit from listening. And leave us a review on your favorite podcasting platform. Your ratings and reviews help more people find our podcast. If you're inspired to gain clarity and peace of mind about financial matters, don't hesitate to reach out to our team at Asperient. Go to asperient.com/start a dialogue. Or you can email Sandy and me at podcasts@asperient.com. See you next time.